Pete, the last time we hooked up was during the pandemic. I just look back and I literally released our interview in April of 2020, which was like, wow, we were really in the thick of it.
Yes, we
So
were.
now and I remember during that time period I was looking forward to catching up with everybody from that era. Just to
Right.
see activity back, albums happening, and clearly mixed bags out. You're playing again, things are happening. So ultimately, how did you survive the pandemic and how good does it feel right now?
Wow. Well, I think that's a great question for anybody.
Yeah.
And Jill, thanks for having me, and for your viewers. I'm thrilled to be here. I hope you enjoy what you're going to hear and hear when we talk about the music. But in terms of the pandemic, very interesting question because two things happened, or multiple things happened. I'm a full-time professor at William Patterson University in New Jersey, and we had to do everything on Zoom or videos or other ways to make our classes run. The students didn't give up. Somehow we had to make that work. I mean, I really had to learn the online technology to make this work. So I know a few things about. I'm here. I made it to Zoom. So it has its benefits. We learned some new technology. Of course, we had to. We had no choice. But of course, everybody wants the in-person experience. And musicians weren't doing anything. I mean, my band didn't play. None of my colleagues were doing. There was no Broadway shows. There was nothing. People were having a hard time surviving. I had colleagues even retire from playing entirely because they were getting older. They didn't know when this pandemic was going to end. They relied on like things like Broadway and recording dates to make money, and all of that was gone for at least a year.
Yeah.
So what I did was I taught, obviously, but I also wrote a lot of music because although I was still teaching full time, I had a lot more downtime. I did write a piece of music that was sort of a little tone poem, if you will, to waiting out the pandemic. It's a piece of music on the record called the Dark Hours, and they were dark hours for all of us. So I wrote a little musical tone poem. It was also full of hope too. So that piece of music has a lot of darkness, a lot of ticking clock kind of sound, waiting, and then some brighter moments when we would come on the other side of it. So I wrote a bunch of music. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I just figured, I'm going to make a record one day, I guess. Here's something I'd like to share in the continuation of that, what I was doing during COVID idea, besides writing music and teaching. As I started writing all this music, I must have written 4 or 5 new things during that time. And I realized these are all very different sounding. I got one thing that's a slam bam swinger with lots of scat singing and modern harmony. I got another thing that's a warm and fuzzy slow swinger. I've got this 12-tone thing with a jam band groove, very different. Then I got the modal even eighth thing for the long out the dark hours, the COVID thing. And I said, these are all very different. All of these charts are different. And then I had dreams of going into the studio with an orchestra with strings, yet another different thing. So by the time I started thinking about making another record, and the world was free, and I think I did a gig at Birdland in New York City, as I do every year, I think in 2021, they were opening up again.
Yeah.
I don't know if there were mandates or people were distancing or whatever. By that point, I was getting closer to making a record. And when I looked at this record, I said, everything is very different compared to my other records. So you know what? The variety is going to be this is ironic. Variety will be the focus.
Yeah.
And so everything is going to be completely different. It's sort of a hodgepodge of my musical desires and sensibilities. And so I try to come up with a clever name for the record. And so I call it Mixed Bag, because it's really a bag of different genres in one bag. So it's a mixed bag. So that's kind of the story there.
So talk to me a little bit about, being a mixed bag leads me to think about how many things changed during the pandemic. And you talked about people that just stopped playing music. I know elements of electronica were coming in. There was just kind of the modern music was just kind of evolving into a new place. So
Mhm.
speaking of doing a mixed bag, how
Mhm.
happy are you with our evolution of this music we call jazz right now in 2025?
Oh, that's a huge question. I'll tell you one thing. Evolution is a great word because the word jazz itself is very hard to define. Very hard to define.
Yeah.
Uh, some of my colleagues, modern composer arrangers certainly in the jazz orchestra big band world, I think of people like Maria Schneider. I think of Darcy James Argue. In a lot of ways, they're more modernist than I am. I still have one foot a little in the past. I do like uh, slam bam swinging stuff and warm and fuzzy stuff to a large degree. I still try and make it artful, of course, but it's a very hard question because if you look, here's a good example. If you look at the lineup of jazz festivals, and they still call themselves jazz festivals, you're going to see a lot of crossover stuff. You're going to see blues acts, you're going to see R&B acts, pop music acts. So the word jazz itself, at least in terms of marketing jazz festivals, has really morphed. I think a prime person, and I hope you interview him, is Christian McBride.
Yeah.
Christian McBride has got his foot in everything.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy can operate convincingly in just about any genre.
Yeah.
Any genre. He's more groove-based musician. I haven't heard him play like completely out free avant-garde music.
Yeah.
But other than that, I mean, you put him in electric bass in his hands and do funky stuff, he's going to eat it up. You give him 4/4 swinging time, he's going to eat it up. So the evolution is it's hard. It's a tree. You know, the trunk of the tree is here, and the branches have sprung in all directions. I like to think that there's some aspects of the music, some DNA that has held true, if we're going to call this music jazz music. I think improvisation, I think groove, I think personal expression. You know, does it have to swing? Not necessarily anymore, of course. But I like some aspect of that still. That's still in my
Yeah.
DNA a lot of the time. So it's a hard question. I just think that it's a tree that's growing and the branches are still growing, and there's no one way to define it. It really isn't.
No, there isn't. And you know, what I like to do on Neon Jazz is I think we get pigeonholed in jazz in that glorified 50s, 60s realm. And a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
of, you know what I'm saying? A lot of music revolves around it, but there's so many cats right now that are nailing it. There's so much good music
Oh,
coming out. I get
the
it every
future.
day in my mailbox. It's like it's Christmas Day every day. It's like, wow, it's amazing, you know, from Cellar Live to Smoke. All these labels are just
Smoke.
they're
Yeah.
yeah, they're hitting it hard. So you know, I try to have the old world and the new world. I think that's the big thing. So, my question to you is this.
Mm.
Ultimately, what do you hope the listener gets from Mixed Bag? What do you want them to get from this project?
Mm, I want them to get an appreciation for what a jazz orchestra can do. I mean, it's a wonderful genre. It's a wonderful orchestration. It's so important to the history of jazz music. Again, I talked about Maria and Darcy and people like that. They still have a basic setup of the jazz orchestra, the big band, reeds, trombones, trumpets, rhythm, you know, and maybe a guitar, maybe a French horn, maybe vibes, whatever. The heart and soul of it is, it's so deep in American music that it can do a lot of things besides just play, you know, swing your riffs. I mean, it is so, I think of people like Ed Palermo doing the music of Frank Zappa.
Yeah,
And I was often played in his band years ago when I still played trombone,
yeah,
which I don't anymore, of course. I had to retire because of my lips muscles. But it still sounds like a jazz orchestra, like a big band. It's a wonderful sound. I mean, the possibilities, the dynamics, the fact that you have brass, a brighter sound at times. You have reeds, woodwinds, and of course saxophones, which have another orchestration sound. It's not a full symphony orchestra, of course not, but you know you still have a wide variety of textures, all sitting on a stage together. They can operate together. It's a marvelous thing to write for because at times I can write all for all 13 horns together, and it'll sound like a unit. I can write only for the saxophones, only for the trombones. There's such variety and it's horn based. It's all horn based, which is very human sounding for me.
yeah,
I know electronica is a big deal, digital music's a big deal, all that, but the horns are closer to humanity than electronics, if
yeah,
you ask me.
yeah.
I mean, guitar, yes, electric guitar, you can do a lot of human sounding things on it, but you're not breathing through a thing. You're not singing through a thing. I guess guitarists might get mad at me if I say that.
That's
They
all
sing
right.
through their guitar. I get that.
Yeah,
But it's physically the idea of breathing into something and a sound coming out that you've made from your body is, and you got 13 people doing it,
yeah.
other than the rhythm section, you know, that's very special to me. Very special. And I want people to appreciate all the things a jazz orchestra can do in many different kinds of bags, you know.
I, I, I don't really care what people where their genres lie, they have to see a jazz orchestra live. It would be preferable if they enjoyed it. And it's so hard to tour. It's so hard for logistics and for economics and all of that. But I know in Kansas City, we have the Kansas City Jazz Orchestra. In fact, on International Jazz Day, we have the Count Basie Orchestra come in. And if
Yeah.
no one's ever experienced that wall of sound, that cacophony, the good cacophony of
Wall
sound
of
and blending,
sound.
absolutely. It's very essential to the experience. And I think more people need to experience that.
Man, the first time I sat in front of I can't remember the very first time I sat in front of a big band. My father took me to see the Glenn Miller Orchestra. I think I was 7 years old. And it was, Glenn had been dead since 1944, but I think we sat down. It was in some Lake Compounce, is an amusement park in Connecticut where I grew up. And they had a ballroom, like they did in the swing here. I was still hanging around since then. So my dad brings me there. Of course, it's the music of his generation. So he sits me down. I'm 7 years old, and I think we're close to the stage. And I was just knocked out. I was like, "What is that? This wall of sound, you call it?" In fact, I use that term with my students. I say, "Oh, here's my neighborhood. Can you hear it?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Good old
So I love
Brooklyn."
the ambiance.
Oh yeah, that's a nice way of putting it. Uh, anyway, the wall of sound. I tell my students, when you write, you have that potential that you can't get anywhere else in the whole wide world, and it's acoustic.
Yeah.
And if you're in, it's in the hands of some serious horn players, brass players, and saxophone players. And you're close to it, in front of it,
Yeah.
man. It's like a tornado hits you of beauty.
Yeah, it is. It's beautiful. So speaking of, what are you doing for live music? What are you doing to present Mixed Bag? What's going on?
Okay, so I have a standing invitation. I'm very grateful to say at the club Birdland in New York City, and in fact, nothing's on the books right now. But about 2 weeks ago, we did have a gig there with the band. More than 2 weeks. It was May 25th. It was our CD release engagement. We played one big set. We played all the songs from the record, this new record I put out. It was sold out, standing room only. I'm grateful to say um, we've done 5 gigs there in the past, over the past 5, 6 years, and this was the first time it was completely sold out. So this record is getting a fair amount of PR and radio play, so that helps attract attention to it. And maybe people remember me, but they're catching on a little bit. I played at the Blue Note before, but now I have a home at Birdland once a year. And I always like to write new music, so I don't do a monthly gig there. I just once a year. Gianni, who owns the club, uh, he always invites me back, and I always have something new to present. I want it to be an event. Because I teach full time at William Patterson University as a professor, that occupies an enormous amount of my time. So I can't be doing a ton of gigs.
Yeah.
I was very busy up till a couple of years ago with a vocal group, 4 singers, called the Royal Bobsters. I was the
Yeah.
tenor in the group.
Yeah.
And we were gigging, we were doing European tours, we had a record, we had a week at Birdland, we did all kinds of stuff. And I was in that group for about 8 years. And then the teaching and making this record became much more of a priority for me. So I had to kind of extricate myself from the Royal Bobsters. And so that's where I am. I mean, if a gig comes down the pike, I'll be glad to take it, but we'll probably be at Birdland again next year.
So if anyone wants to pick up a copy that will benefit you the most, Mixed Bag, is it going to your site or is it Bandcamp? How do they do that?
Oh, they can go to summitrecords.com.
Okay.
Go
All right.
right to the record label. Actually, it's anywhere. It's at Amazon. I'm sure it's at all over the place.
Okay.
It's on Spotify and Pandora. It's on all those forums too. Be nice if you got the record because it has the liner notes.
Exactly. And
The
it's
cute
attractive.
artwork.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I that's what I was going to say too. I love the cover. I love everything that goes into it. I usually wait, but I jumped the gun. I already had it on the show, so I'm going to play it again. So it's wonderful to catch up. Like I said at the onset of this, I really, really was looking forward to talking to all of the musicians that I talked to during the pandemic because I just wanted to feel that warmth of being back at it. So it's good. You got an album, you're playing, we're talking about Birdland. I love it. So thank you. Thank you for taking a minute out today. I really appreciate it.
All right, Joe. Well, thank you very much. And fans, I hope you'll dig the music. And trust me, there's something for everybody on this record.
Hey jazz fans, Joe Domino here, the host of the weekly Neon Jazz radio show and regular interview series being produced and distributed from Lee Summit, Missouri. We are very excited to let you know about the second annual Lee Summit Jazz Festival taking place again this summer on June 28th at the Bridge Space, located at 210 Southwest Market Street in downtown Lee Summit. Following the success of the 2024 festival, the lineup will include Lee Summit students, KC Area Youth Jazz, Paganova with Michael Pagan, Horoscope with Stan Kessler, Brad Gregory, Adam Larson, and the Lee Summit Jazz Orchestra. There will also be food trucks and vendors to round out a day of celebration. Early bird tickets are 2 for $30, and all details can be found at lsjazzfest.com. We can't wait to see you there.